Hey everyone, so I finally got around to recording the first of these Scratch lessons for you. So head over to your search engine of choice. Here we've got Google, type in Scratch, and the first link should be the Scratch website. So on the website, you can browse existing projects that other people have created. You can create your own. You can create an account to save all your projects. And any of the projects that are on here, you can download and play with to your heart's content, change them, modify them, do whatever you want. So let's start by signing in. I've already got an account. You might need a parent's email address in order to set up an account, depending on how old you are. And now we can go to the Create tab where we can start creating stuff. We're not actually going to create a program today. What we are going to do is look at the interface for the program so you can find out where everything is, you know a little bit more about it, you're a bit more familiar with it. Now your program's canvas as such is here in this top left-hand corner. You can see it with a cat sprite in the middle of it. This is where all the action will go on in terms of where your content is displayed when your program's running. In the bottom left-hand corner, you can see an area called Sprites. So here you can see we've got Sprite 1, which is the sprite that appears in our canvas area, our program area up here. Now, this bottom left-hand corner is where you can allocate various specifics to your sprite. So if you click on the little blue eye icon, you can see that you can customize the sprite by giving it a different name. We're going to call it Bob. You can change its direction, so you can change the angle of it, and you see how that interacts with the sprite on the canvas. So we set it to 90 degrees there, if I can just get my mouse in the right place. Yep. You can change how it moves when it moves. So there's a rotation style. Now at the moment, if I was to do something with this sprite, it would just spin around on the spot. But I can change it so that it moves left and right. We can also hide it if we want to hide it. And there's other things we can do with these sprites. So you can add a new sprite from your library. You can paint a new sprite, so you can create your own images to use as sprites. Upload sprites from files, or use your camera to create your own sprites. So lots of ways to create your own content here. You don't just have to use the ones that are available. But if we do have a look in the library, you'll find that there are quite a wide selection of sprites for you to use. Now they're all very basic, very simple images, but obviously you can create your own should you want to. So closing that, the other big component of this top left-hand area is the backdrop, and you can customize that. Now next to the sprite section in the bottom left, you see we have stage 1 backdrop listed. And if you click on that, you can actually customize it by loading up a backdrop. So you can see the options underneath. You've got choose backdrop from library, paint a new one, the same kind of options we had with the sprites. So you can even import a backdrop that's a picture that you've taken with your own camera. Here, if we look in the library, again, a variety of things. I'm going to go for a castle. Why not? So I double click on that. And there we go. Took a little while to load up there. But as you can see, I've now got a castle as the backdrop for my program. And while Scratch saves this and gives me back control, we'll talk about this right-hand side. So you can see on this right-hand side, we've got a number of tabs. We've got a scripts tab, a backdrops tab, as I click through them, and a sounds tab. Okay. Now the backdrops tab is enabled because we've got the backdrop selected over here in this left-hand side. If I click on my sprite, you'll see we've now got a costumes tab up here in the top. Now, we'll get into the exactly why and what we can do with costumes in a moment, but let's focus on the backdrop. So you can see the backdrop here allows us to edit the backdrop with a standard kind of paint package. So you can do whatever you want to that, draw whatever shapes you want. If you're a talented artist, you can make some really cool backdrops. I'm going to leave it as is for now, but the standard controls there, anything from a paint package you'd be familiar with. And that's my basic backdrop. I can get rid of this first one if I want, because I'm not really using that. And I'm just going to stick with my castle. Okay. You've also got sounds tab up here. And here you can load in all the sounds you might want to use in your program. And it'll list them all. And then you can access those with your code. And we'll get to the code in a moment. So here you can see we've got a simple pop sound. I think if I play that, it's not going to get picked up by the recording software, but you can load up a multitude of sounds. So here we go, choose sound from library. We've got people coughing, we've got horses galloping, motorbikes passing, wolves howling, all sorts of stuff. And they're all categorized: animal, electronic, musical loops. So there's plenty of stuff there, but you can, of course, as with everything else, record your own. So if you've got a microphone, you can record your own sounds. You might do those yourself with your voice. You might, I don't know, blow raspberry, have yourself saying hello, or you might play some music maybe. Maybe if you're a talented guitarist, you might want some guitar music to play in the background of your program. So there's loads of different options there for what you can do with sounds. And of course, you can import sounds from files as well. So if you've got, for example, a piece of music that you like, maybe you've got an MP3, I don't know, Rihanna or Lady Gaga, whoever it might be, you could import that music and have that playing in the background too. Although be aware, if you use music in that way, that you need to have all the kind of copyright permissions and that kind of stuff. So, going back to our sprites for a moment then. You'll see this, if we click on the sprite down here, this sprite actually has a sound attached to it, which is a meow sound. But if we look at the costumes tab, this is where you can do some quite important things with your sprites. So you might have a program that makes use of a particular bad guy, and you've got a hero, and maybe he's running around doing stuff, and if he hits the bad guy dies, maybe it turns into a ghost. So one of the ways you can do things like that is you can have a sprite having a second costume. So our sprite Bob here may have a second costume, which was a ghost. So if we pick costume 2 here for Bob, and we're going to change that. In fact, I'm going to get rid of that one, and I'm going to add in a new costume. And I'm pretty sure there's a ghost in here somewhere. So let's have a look in the fantasy section. Yeah, so we've got a ghost. So I'm going to select that ghost and bring that in here. So now you can see that I have 2 costumes. I have the cat costume and the ghost costume. So perhaps I'm making a game where I'm fighting cats, and maybe that's a not very nice thing to do, but you know, in this instance, when the cat dies, it turns into a ghost. It's a happy ghost though, so it's not all bad. So you can switch between those two, and that allows you within your computer program to assign costume changes. So when actions occur, you can tell the program to change the costume for your main sprite, but you have to have those costumes preloaded for your sprite. You can have a whole wardrobe in there. You can have them being completely different. You could have a witch that turns a cat into an elephant. You know, so you've got 2 sprites, a witch and a cat, but your cat has 2 costumes: the cat itself and the elephant costume. And when the witch casts the spell on the cat, it turns it into an elephant. So you can do those kinds of things. Now, when it comes to coding your program, so writing the computer code, putting those building blocks together to make all of this cool stuff happen, you do that in the scripts section up at the top here. Now, all of the bits of computer code appear like blocks with text on them that describes what they do. Those blocks are stitched together by you to create computer programs. It's really simple and really straightforward. But one of the key things to remember is that you can apply computer code, or these blocks, to 2 different things. You can apply them to your sprites to give them instructions, and you can apply them to your backdrops. And if you place code on your backdrop, it's a more universal piece of code that's controlling the program. It might be a game, it might be whatever, but that's the controlling code. And then you've got code on your sprites, which directly controls the sprites. And you can have them interact, and we'll look at things like that later. Some of the particular lessons that we go through will have those interactions between the controlling code placed on the backdrop and the code you've got on your sprites. So if we take an example here and we just drag one of these blocks onto our sprite, that says this sprite's going to move 10 steps. It doesn't tell you when it's going to happen, when it's going to be activated, but at some point the sprite should move 10 steps. Now if I move down to the bottom left and I switch over to the backdrop, you'll see that code disappears. I'm still on the script section, but that particular code has disappeared. And you'll also find that certain code blocks aren't available for the backdrop because they're just not valid for a backdrop. For example, motion. So the motion section is completely empty. There's no blocks down here at all. Now if we flick back to the sprite, again, we've got all of the motion blocks back because it doesn't make sense to move your backdrop, but it does make sense to move your sprite. So there's lots of different things we can do with sprites in terms of movement, but you've got to remember that distinction between the code blocks that you use on your backdrop and the code blocks that you use on your sprite. And it's very easy to get into a situation where you think you're adding code blocks to one thing and you're actually adding them to another. So be very careful with that. And make sure you check when you're adding your blocks that you're adding them to the right component, whether it's a sprite or a backdrop. Okay, so let's have a look through the various code blocks that are available to us and the sections that they're spread out into. So you can see they're all color coded. We've got motion, looks, sound, pen, data, events, control, sensing, operators, and more blocks. So the main thing is control. Not control, even events. Oh, my brain. It's falling out of my ears today. So events are very important because events will start your program running, as well as doing a couple of other things. But the big one is when green flag clicked. And you'll notice that this green flag is mirrored up here next to what looks like a red stop sign. And that's exactly what that red blob does. That's stopping your program. The green flag starts it, the red flag stops it. But in order to be able to have your program do stuff, it needs to know that it started, and that's why you use the event block when green flag clicked. And that will tell your program to do stuff. Now, you don't necessarily have to have that on your backdrop because your backdrop might not do a lot. We could take that off here, and you can just drag them back to get rid of them. Drag it back on to put it on there. You can press the delete. You can right click on it and you get a little menu. You can select delete. I think you can press the delete button, or maybe not. No, you can't press the delete button. Okay. So you can right click and delete them there. Or you can drag them on, drag them off. Easy. And these blocks combine really simply. So if you take that block and then you take another block underneath, so say broadcast message, you drag it on and you'll see a little white highlight appears showing that you can connect those two together, and bingo, just like pushing two Lego blocks together, they're connected. And you can drag them apart very easily, or you can drag them all off and get rid of them. That simple. Now you may have noticed when we have a block on our canvas here, you can right click and also select duplicate. And that does exactly what you would think, creates an extra one. Again, you can drag it off if you don't want it. And you also have the ability to add a comment. So you can type in here exactly what this is going to do. Start program maybe. And that'll stay attached to the block so you can keep track of what your code does. It's very easy to understand these programs, but sometimes you just need that little bit of a pointer that helps other people when they're coming to it to understand what's going on, and as a reminder for yourself. And you can minimize those, maximize those, kind of expand those as you want. And delete them, duplicate them, anything you want to do. You'll also notice we have the help option, and that'll tell you exactly what that particular block does. So if you're not sure, just right click on a block, select help, and it'll give you a bit of extra information there that should hopefully clear up the details of the block and get you on your way. So what other stuff have we got in here? So we looked at the motion section, which is empty for the backdrop, but for the sprite it's not. And as you can see, we have a variety of things we can do. We can tell our sprites to turn, we can tell our sprites to move, we can tell them to move to specific points in our program space, and we can also tell them to do things like bounce off edges and rotate certain angles, loads of different stuff. So here we've got a move 10 steps. So if I was to take the when clicked block and attach that to the top of our move 10 steps, in theory, when I run this program, our sprite Bob should move 10 steps. That's 10 steps apparently. It looked like 1, but apparently it's 10. Let's see if I move that up to, say, 50, if he moves more. Yeah. So you can see that by changing that value in the block, you change what the block does. So in this instance, just the size of the movement from 10 steps to 50. And I know it doesn't look like he's moving 10 steps individually, but that's because things move so quickly that you don't actually see him step 10 times. It's just one big leap. So that's an example of simply giving controls to a sprite, stitching things together. Dead easy. But there's loads of other things we can do. So there's the looks section, and this allows us to interact with things like the costumes, for example. So if I was to bring out the next costume block, and again I went back and picked up the when green flag clicked block, stitched those together and pressed the green flag, my sprite changes its costume. So it's gone from the cat sprite costume that we saw to the ghost costume, which we loaded up earlier. Again, dead easy. And you can construct things, as I mentioned before, to have them work when certain events happen. So rather than it being the green flag clicked, it's somebody hitting the cat and turning it into a ghost, or maybe the cat walking into a trap and turning it into a ghost. That's a bit nice to think about than somebody hitting a cat. Other things we can do with looks, we can show and hide sprites. You can see those blocks here. We can tell sprites to say stuff. So if we have a sprite saying hello, we change the events. Again, we'll trigger this on the clicking. We'll give it a longer time so you can see it properly. And if I click go, our sprite says hello. So you can construct programs where you have characters interacting and saying things. You know, if you've played role-playing games in the past, you'll know that, you know, you walk up to a computer-controlled character and it gives you a big speech about sending you off on a quest and all this kind of stuff. So you can create little things like that, have your characters interact with one another, have conversations with one another. You can probably even make it quite complex so that you can give characters choices on, depending on what they pick, depends on what the computer character then says next, and those kind of things. So that's an example of one of the other things we can do in the look section. Next up, pretty straightforward, this one, the sound section. So you can make your program trigger sounds, and you can have this trigger specific instruments, specific sound files. You can mute all sounds, you can change the volume, loads of stuff you can do, including changing the speed that sounds are played at. So you could, maybe if you recorded yourself saying something, put it onto a character, you could speed it up and have yourself talking really fast. And loads of weird and wacky things you can do with sounds. And again, you can have those triggered by whatever events that you put into your program. Now, the next section, I must admit, is new to me, and this is the pen section. I haven't dabbled much in the pen section, but it looks like it's a drawing tool for your program, so you can tell your pen to do certain things in certain colors. You can change the size of the pen. Not quite sure how this interacts with your program, so we might cover that separately in another lesson. But the help will always be there for you. So if you're not sure on a particular thing, so let's try stamp and look at the help there. So it says a stamp's a temporary image of a sprite that's drawn on your stage. And it can be drawn over or cleared using the clear block. A stamp can't move and it can't hold script. So it's a bit, it's a temporary sprite that you can't give instructions to, but you can get rid of it. So there's cool stuff you can do with images with this pen section. So next up, we're going to look at the data section. And the data section's really important because the data section is where you define all of your variables. Now, variables are a bit like a cup that holds a value. So, you know, in a cup, you could have Diet Coke, you could have water, you could have milk, and that's your value. That's the type of thing that's inside your cup. And in this case, you know, we can put numbers and words and stuff into a variable. So if we create one and call it number, we can create that variable for all of our sprites and make it accessible to all of them should they want to use it, or we can create it for a specific sprite. We're going to create this one for all of them. So we've got a variable called number, and we can set the value of that with this block. We can change its value, and we can show and hide it. And we can make use of that in other areas of our program. You'll find that some aspects of your program include numbers. I think where did we edit one of those earlier? So there's motion. So you notice we had the move 10 steps block. So if we put that back down with an event, so that's going to move our sprite, and we run that, and our sprite moves. And we go back to the data section. Now we can pick our number variable, and we can replace the 10 with the number. Now at the moment, number I think is set to 0. So if we run that, our sprite doesn't move at all. But what we can do is we can insert a line before it that changes the value of number. So if we change that to 50, and then we run our program again, you'll see our sprite jumps, and it jumps by 50. And that's because we're saying, when you click the green flag, set the value in our cup, and our cup's called number, set the value in our number cup to 50. And then move whatever the value in that number cup is, which is 50. So we see our sprite jump. So there you can see how these variables work. They're effectively a little container for a value of some kind. It might be a number, it might be a word. And you can use those, plug them into your code blocks, and make them work for you. So we get rid of this code. Let's have a look at a list and how a list varies. So if we say, call this list numbers, and again, we'll make that for all sprites. So how numbers differs is, being a list, you can add multiple things to it. So you can see we've got the ability to add something to our list. So I'm a keen football fan, so I like to see a league table that looks a little bit like this. And then we can add maybe another one in here, which said something like, oh, if I could type, and then another one in here that said, although I'd rather they were a bit further down, but we can't have everything. And then maybe another one in here. Now, first up, I want to clear out my list. So I'm just going to add that one in the top so it clears that first value. And I'm going to run this, and it should clear my list and then add those in. And there we go. So as you can see on that left-hand side, we've now got 4 items in our list: Liverpool, Chelsea, Man United, and Man City. And there you go. That's the way of adding things to a list. And you can call those at any point, reference them by their number. So the position in the list is how you call that particular value. Okay, what else have we got? So in the events, we have various triggers, as mentioned at the start. So You can trigger things based on when sprites are clicked, when the green arrows clicked, green flag rather, and other things. But then we got the control section. Now, again, this is very important because if you want to trigger certain things happening in your script, in your program, you need to have triggers. And those occur in this control block. So you can say, if my ghost touches a person, then turn that person into a ghost, for example. So you can have if ghost touches person, person changes costume into ghost. And that's one of the blocks in here. So we've got this if block. And we have also the if else block and a number of looping blocks that say, do this certain thing over and over again. So for example, if we wanted our ghost to move forward and backwards around the screen, or across the screen rather, you could tell him to move 10 steps, but you could put it inside a forever block. And now the forever block says, do this over and 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 over again and never ever stop. And that's something you might want to do in your computer program. You might want to have a character or a sprite moving around the area, around the backdrop forever. And there's other things you can do. So you can do something until something happens. So repeat an operation until something happens. So that might be, for example, repeat the ghost moving across the screen until it bumps into another object, and then it might stop. And you can have control items that stop everything happening. So there's loads of things you can do here, loads of important things. The if block in particular, you'll find yourself using an awful lot. So that's how we control various items in our code. Then we've got sensing. So this is giving a bit of intelligence to our various sprites. So we can say, if our sprite is touching something else, do this. So using the control and the sensing blocks, you can build up complicated functions that allow your sprites to interact with each other. Maybe, if sprite touches sprite, then you might have one of them say, pardon me, all sorts of, whatever it might be, you can get them to do various things. So there's a load of different blocks in here. You can have them reacting to touching colors, reacting to sounds, lots of different stuff. Okay, then we move on to our operators. Now, operators are the kind of maths functions within your programs. So you might be running a game. Imagine it's a football game and it's the first person to 5 that wins. So you might need to do some maths in there that says, when score equals 5, end game, blow the final whistle kind of thing. So that's when you make use of blocks like these equals blocks. And you might have a variable called score that holds the value of the number of goals that have gone in. So you would put that in the first bit, and you might have equals 5 in the second bit. And then you can have an if block that says if score equals 5, then end game. Those kind of things. So that's how we start to structure things and put them together. Really simple. So that's our operators, and they're very kind of maths focused. But there's other bits and pieces we can do in here as well. So we can join words together, test the length of certain words or variables. And then there's the more blocks section where you can make your own blocks. Now, I'm not going to dabble into that now because there's quite a lot that's involved in that. But you can construct your own blocks. If you find that you're using a particular operation over and over again, something that you've customized with your own variables and stuff, you might want to make a block that represents that. And then you can reuse it wherever you want. So that's the scripts and the control blocks that you can use. Loads of stuff you can put together to make a program, and we'll see those in use when we do the first lesson. But I think that kind of gives you a sense of what you can do within Scratch. There's loads of different bits and pieces in there to learn, and the more you practice, the more you become familiar with everything that's in there, and you'll soon be able to build your first programs. So hopefully that gives you a sense of what it's all about. Stay tuned for our next video, because that will be the first coding lesson, and we'll try and build our first computer program. So stay tuned for that. Hit that subscribe button and you'll get access to all the videos when they go live, and hopefully the next one won't take as long to be uploaded as this one did. So we'll speak to you next time, and leave me a comment if you've got any questions.